everyone. This is Jackie Martin with Pop-Up Positivity. I've got a great guest I'm excited to be able to spend some time with and to share with you. His name is Derek Brooks, and he is the owner. He and his wife, Kathy, are the owners of Brandywine Printing. One of the best parts about Derek is that he is such an amazing fixture in our community. He and I have been friends for, gosh, I don't know, what, Derek, 10 years, more, maybe more?
Close to 10 years.
I have to say, one of the most incredible lovers of learning, constantly wanting to know more, share more, be more, and so we're so glad to have Derek today. So Derek, tell us a little bit more about yourself so people get to know you.
Yeah, so I'm one of the rare adults who's a Forsyth County native. I was born and raised here, and my dad started Brandywine Printing when I was around 10 years old. It's the only company I've ever worked for. So I don't know a lot, but I know a lot about printing, and it's what I do every day. I have been married for 23 years, and I have a 21-year-old daughter who is a junior at Young Harris College. So yeah, other than that, I really enjoy bird hunting and sporting clays and shotgun type of sports. That's about, there's nothing else to know about me now.
Well, you know what? That is so not true. But you know, kind of coming from that background of real sort of consistency, I think that gives you an interesting perspective. But I also think as I've gotten to know you and your whole family, you tend to focus on what you can do because you've been in the community for what, generations, right?
Mm-hmm.
As your family's been. So I just have always loved and was hoping you would share a little bit more about your take on giving back to the community and all that. I mean, I know you're involved in, golly, just so many things, but tell me a little bit more about what it is that makes you and your whole family want to give back, and what are the different ways that you find you enjoy about, doing that?
So I'll tell you, my wife, she is a natural helper, giver. She's always looked for opportunities to help other people. I have not. I did not start that way. Matter of fact, I was very, I would say, selfish and self-centered prior to the 2008, that whole economic downturn that happened around 2008, 2010. And so my business suffered a lot during that time. And I got to the point where I didn't know what else to do. And I've always, I don't want to say I've always, but I've listened to people who are smarter than me for a long time. And one of my mentors, who was not I never met him, but his name was Zig Ziglar. He was a kind of a motivational speaker. And he used to have this saying, he passed away several years ago, but he had this saying, and it was similar to this. I don't have it exactly memorized, but he said, to get everything you ever wanted out of life, help everybody else get everything they want out of life. And I was at a bottom part of my life where I'm sure I could have been lower, but it felt like the lowest part of my life. And I said, well, I'm going to give that a shot because everything else I'm doing is not working. So I'm going to go look for opportunities to help other people. And if I help enough of them, then I'll be able to get what I want. So I did that. I went and I literally looked for rooms full of people that needed help. And if I could help them, whatever they needed help with, didn't matter what it was, whatever they needed help with, I would do that thing if I could. And what I learned was it made me so happy helping other people. What I wanted when I started doing that changed, because what I thought I wanted out of life was to be famous, to be rich, to for everybody to know who I was and, want to talk to me and all that foolishness. And as I started helping people more and more and more and more, I realized, and I don't maybe Zig Ziglar knew this. Maybe he knew if you helped enough people, then what you would want out of life is to actually help more people. Because that's what it did for me, is it really put blinders up to all the stuff that I thought I wanted, to be rich and famous and all that business. And it just helping people feels so good. And I am My personality type is I am self-centered. I tend to think about myself before I think about others. My wife is totally opposite of that. She puts everybody else before she puts herself. So that's a struggle for me. I have to make a lot of effort to go find people who need help and to help them. But the feeling I get from it is now what I've always wanted in life. And so now that's it. I have this thing called a 50 butt rule. If there's 50 butts in a room, mine is too. And I'm just looking for opportunities in that room to help people always.
You know, I have seen that in action for you, and I feel like that's also contagious. So is that why maybe people like Zig Ziglar or other mentors that you turn to, the reason that you've found yourself also being a lifelong learner, that I constantly see you with you're talking about a new, somebody you're listening to online or a new book you're reading, or you just seem to be taking in all kinds of information. Is that part of the reason, is because that's contagious as you pick that up from other people as well?
You know, I don't know. So I didn't go to college, and I think there was a point in my life where I felt less than other people because I didn't go to college. So I felt like I needed to supplement my my knowledge with somebody else's knowledge. And I learned a long time ago, if somebody, if you should always learn from your mistakes, but if you can learn from other people's mistakes, it saves a lot of time and pain. So I would study other people and say, that didn't work out so good for them. So if I try it, I need to try it differently. So you can do things. I may be able to succeed where somebody else failed, but if I do it exactly the same way they did, I'm going to have the exact same results. So, so I started reading, found I guess one of my favorite authors is John C. Maxwell. And I found a book of his, and probably the first book I ever read. I'd been out of high school for 6 years, just kind of doing the best I could do, thinking that I knew everything and didn't ever considered learning anything from anybody else, because why? Because I know what to do. And I picked up a book. I actually had some bad things happen in my life that I was back there where I said, okay, I've got to do something different. And so I found a book and I read it, and it really applied to my situation. And so I was able to change my behavior. What it did was it made me aware of more aware of myself. So I knew what I was not good at as much because I thought I was good at everything. I guess I was probably 22 years old or 23 years old. And that book made me aware of some blind spots I had. So I said, oh, that was the kind of a catalyst for me. And at that point, I wanted to learn everything I could. And so I've read books that I didn't learn anything from, but I've never stopped wanting. There's way smarter people than me out there. And if I can just tap into them a little bit and get a little piece of their wisdom, maybe I can help somebody with it. That's really what it comes down to. If I could be a resource for people to help them because I learned something somewhere, then that's what I want. I've read this quote in a bunch of books. I don't know who Charlie Tremendous Jones is. I've never researched him, but he's famous for this quote. The person you are today and the person you'll be in 5 years, the only difference is the people you meet and the books you read. Now, I believe that we can add podcasts or digital. There's that digital format didn't exist when he said that. I believe podcasts and different digital media can apply to that as well. But if you just wake up and do the same thing every day and don't ever improve yourself, you're going to be the same person. So you got to go somewhere that outside of yourself to get some wisdom so that you can be aware of who you are, why you do things, why people like you or don't like you. And if you're aware of it, you can change it if you want to, or at least you can be aware of it and warn people, here I come.
Right. Well, and so what you were just saying about that quote, originally when you were telling the story about what sort of started you on the journey of awareness and introspection, had to be, you said, back in the late or 2007, 2008, you said when things sometimes happen, a little downturn or something occurs. I would venture to say we can all agree we're kind of in that right now.
Oh, yeah.
Where people have a choice. And so that quote you just gave about, who you're around and what you listen to, I also wonder if we could add in there something about how your perspective on things, or how you come across, or how you weather, or how resilient you are during times of struggle, which is kind of where we are right now. And so I'm just wondering, in this current circumstance, what are you thinking we can apply that really can help keep people more focused and positive? Kind of like that quote, but for right now, and maybe you've already applied it in downturns in the past that moved you to a more positive space. Any ideas about how you would sort of extend that quote?
Yeah, I'll say this. For me, in school, I was not a good student. I was not a good, I didn't get good grades. I was a distraction. I was probably a class clown. But there were certain subjects I disliked more than others, and history was one of those. Today, I love history. And the reason is, in school, I didn't realize that history was real people. I thought we were just learning about some dead people that, why does this apply to me? As an adult, I've studied history and learned that there's very few situations that somebody hadn't already lived through. Now, COVID-19 has caused some weird stuff in this world that none of us have ever lived through, and nobody else has ever lived through too. But there have been things like this. And I remember reading an autobiography from James Adams, second president James Adams? Am I making that up? Yeah. Anyhow, one of the early presidents. I think
John Adams.
John Adams. Yeah. James, John. They're all somewhere. Anyhow, John Adams. That's right. So he was the second president, and he lived in Boston, Massachusetts, and he traveled by horse to Philadelphia for the Second Continental Congress, where they were going to for Congress to make the new laws and all that stuff. And while he was gone, so that was a 2-week trip, and then he got there, and then he had to come back. While he was gone, his hometown was struck by a disease. And I'll tell you, the name of the disease was called dysentery. And I'll tell you more about that in a second if you're not familiar with that term. But people died. Families died. While he was gone, houses, just everybody that lived in them died because this dysentery was spreading throughout their whole town. And if you're not familiar with that term, dysentery was uncontrollable diarrhea, and people died. And so that's an awful, awful thing that, I mean, like most of the town died. So compare that to today. The difference is we've got the internet, we've got ways to communicate, but that's not a thing anymore. And when you think about that, and I mean, if you just think, oh my goodness, I've had some stomach issues before, but I didn't die. And you really hadn't heard of anybody dying because of that sort of thing in our lifetime. But it was common back then. So history, we're going to learn from this. And what I need to do as an individual is do some research and learn about things like that and say, you know what, this is bad, but it's been a lot worse for a lot of people. And just because in my house, in my little world, I'm uncomfortable right now, there's people in their house right now that are sick and that are dying, and it's very unfortunate. But you look back at history, there's things that have been way worse than what we're dealing with now, and lots more people have died. So history is a really, there's some, I don't remember the saying, history is a good indicator of the future, something like that. But that's how I do it. I know that this is bad, but there's more people that have had it worse. And so I'm fortunate to be I mean, at this point, everybody in my family is healthy. So I'm uncomfortable. I'm an extrovert. I like people. I would prefer to be in a room with real people instead of looking at a camera knowing that you're on the other side. I enjoy this, but not near as much as hanging out with real people. So it's been a lot worse. It could be a lot worse. And just knowing that fact, and the fact that history has had a lot worse situations, kind of keeps my head up and keeps me moving through. And I mean, we've had recent history because, so we got sickness going on right now, but we also have economic issues right now. As a business owner, this is crazy. This is crazy. Our volume is way lower than it's ever been, but we did this in 2008. We did it 2008 through 2012, 2010. So I'm able to look back at that and look at the similarities, look at how we came out of it. Remember that we did come through it. Everybody, I mean, everything that we've ever had in my lifetime, and it's about every 10 years, there's some kind of crazy thing. Every single time we came through it, the world keeps on turning. And there's got to be things that we learn from it. If you didn't learn from it, you've wasted this time that we get to make decisions and change.
You know, I love that, because I think that really is the notion of perspective. And so perspective can come from history. Perspective can come from other people who have it worse. Even now in our situation, we are still in, I consider the best country in the world, and our sacrifice is to stay at home on our couch. They talk about when, what's considered the greatest generation, and those 18 to 25-year-old young men were asked to pick up weapons and go to war for us in that era. And so I would say that was a huge sacrifice, and all of their families supporting that. I mean, what we're being asked to do. Wow. And you're right. What you just said to me, I loved about being able to look back on not just your own experiences, but through history, the experiences of people who've made it work in these kinds of circumstances or worse. You keep that, in mind, or keep taking in that information, and that gives you perspective to go, hey, look, we did it before, we can do it again. I think that's a great way to stay positive. Well, so let me ask you one other thing about giving back in the community, because I think you've been bringing that perspective to the community. Is there anything you're able to do right now that you're able, something you guys are continuing to do? I know you're doing a lot of work with the Chamber of Commerce, with the Rotary, with a lot of other organizations. Is everybody still meeting? How's all that going?
Yeah, everybody's still meeting, but it's like this. I'm seeing everybody on a computer screen instead. But yeah, my Rotary Club still meets every Tuesday morning. I tell you, it's kind of neat because with controlled virtual meetings, you don't get interrupted as much. You get your turn to speak, and nobody's messing with you because we can mute everybody. I don't know. It's pretty neat. Rotary, Chamber of Commerce is doing meetings all the time, all virtual as well. What my family and I are doing more than we used to is we're eating restaurant food a lot. So we've done every night so what we're doing to be able to afford this is this is crazy. So we're making personal sacrifices so we can support our local restaurants. So for breakfast and lunch, we're drinking protein shakes. But every night for supper, we go to some restaurant who's doing family packs and all local owned. We're not doing any chains. All locally owned restaurants, and we're ordering family packs to go, and we're leaving big old tips because we know, sometimes the tip is as much as the meal cost, because we know that the people who work in those restaurants work for tips. So that's probably, and we really love it. It's so cool. We left the tip last night, and the guy was like, thank you. That's awesome. And it wasn't that big. It was just bigger than he's used to. So that's been a lot of fun, and it goes back to helping people, so we know restaurants are hurting, so we want to help them. And so that's been the coolest thing. And then because we've got a whole bunch of food, that's kind of hard to divvy out. We're not eating on the couch, we're eating at the table, which is a kind of a new thing. It's not a new thing, but we're kind of coming back to it. I think because my daughter's home from college because of all this, so the three of us are eating together, and so it's easier to eat at the table and not in front of the TV, and it's kind of neat. So yeah, so that we're making the best of it.
I love it. I love it. Gee, what a sacrifice. Let's go out to dinner each night. I love it. I do love it. And I think that's really great that you're helping out the local businesses, because the truth is we want them to stay in business.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, when we come back out of this, we want those folks to still be around because they're so wonderful in our community. Well, let me ask you this, Derek, and you've already started to go there, but my friend Nina Aubert shared a saying with me years ago, and she says it all the time, and I'm now ending all of our conversations this way. To get that perspective is the question, what if it's better? I mean, we're in uncertain circumstances, and I know it's frustrating and different and lots of change going on. And so my question to you is, when you hear the phrase, what if it's better? What thoughts come to mind to help you stay positive?
So I gotta preface it with, I'm a little different because I love change. I love change. My staff here says, hey, can we wait to see how the last change you made affects us before we do another change? So I love change. And so I always look for the better. I think I heard Lou Holtz say this. He says, I'm not a glass half empty or a glass half full person. I'm a glass all the way full. It's half full of water, half full of air. And that describes me. I'm quite positive. So what if it's better? I don't even think about that. I always think about how it's better, because it's always better. There's always a better. And I always look at that piece. And I mean, that was, for us, we're eating at the dinner table. We're having a lot better conversations. We're also watching a lot of movies. So, I mean, there's three of us in my house, so we each pick a movie that we watch whenever we sit down to watch a movie, and we rotate that. But I mean, I don't know, it can always be better. It can always be better. I think we're using technology in a way. I've told my team here at the office, we're using Slack and another project management software called Asana. And we only did it so that everybody can work virtually. And I told them, I said, look, this is not something we're doing to get through. This is something we're doing to get better. And we're taking advantage of the fact that we have to do it so that we can do it in the future. And I think when everybody's back under our roof, we'll still use this software, and it's just going to make us better. So there's always a better. You just have to look for it. Always, 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 always. I don't care how bad it is. There's always a better if you just look for it. So I love that question.
I love that. Now, listen, two things I've really picked up here in our conversation. One is keep searching for the perspective that you need, whether that's reading through books or talking to mentors or even looking through history. I love that, because I think perspective really puts things, in its place. So we don't feel alone with what we're experiencing. And what you just said about what if it's better, you use the word, you intentionally need to look for that. And I think that's part of what we're hoping our time talking with different fabulous individuals like yourself in this series is to say, sometimes it just comes natural for some people to look for the good or to have their cup half full, and sometimes it doesn't. And so we have to find strategies so that we can be intentional and stay positive. So Derek, thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I appreciate it so much. Thank you for being here, everybody, and sharing with us another episode of Pop-Up Positivity. Stay positive, folks. Thanks for being here.